cover how to use a deployment server to push out these config changes to our universal forwarder. In the previous video, we explained how to get a universal forwarder set up and talking to this deployment server. Now we want the deployment server to have some apps for it to change its configurations. If I log into my deployment server, I'm here, I'm going to go to opt Splunk Etsy deployment apps. That's a different folder than what you're used to. You'll hear Etsy, if you look, there's an Etsy apps, and this is where most people go. But this is the apps that are on your Splunk instance, the specific instance we're talking about. We have deployment apps, which is the app or the apps that you will deploy to other systems. And then just throwing this in there, if you have a index master, a master node as they're called, your apps for your indexers will go here if you're a master node. And the last one, if you're a search head cluster deployer, that's the machine that pushes out to a search head cluster, your stuff will go in this SH cluster folder. So Splunk Etsy has 4 specific app locations. Apps is for local, for your machine. Deployment apps is the one we're going to go into. So let's go into CD deployment apps and let's clear this out. I already have a L.A.M.E UF settings for my system. If I go into L.A.M.E UF settings, oops, I'm going to have to sudo in here. And then I'm going to switch to Splunk so I can stay in the right permissions. Etsy deployment apps. Clear that. And now if I go into L.A.M.E UF settings, we can see, go into my local directory, there's nothing there. But if you go into the default directory, I have a deploymentclient.conf and an outputs.conf. From the previous video, we set those locally on our universal forwarder. I've got the same setting here. If I go into deploymentclient.conf, we'll notice it's pointing back to this very same machine. Same code I had in the other one. If I go outputs.conf, there we go. In this case, I'm actually not pushing to 119. I'm actually pushing to 109, which is my Cribble instance. This is a good example of, I'm going to show this. This is how to, why a deployment server is so nice. I've changed where I want to send logs. Now I'd have to go back to that local universal forwarder and change its configuration settings. And what if I had 100, 1,000 of those? That would be a massive undertaking to go change the code on all of those. But we'll now walk through how to use the deployment server to push this out. I've got the code here. I don't want to recreate the whole entire will, so I'm going to copy these files into a new location. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Biggest thing I'm going to do is the easiest way I found to set up an app, we're going to come in here, we're going to duplicate this tab. This is my deployment server, 1.119, and right now I have some apps. I'm going to go manage apps. I'm going to create a brand new app, and I'm going to call it L.A.M.E YouTube UF settings. So I'm going to go create an app, and it's going to be for log analysis made easy for this YouTube video setting, and then we're going to settings for it. So L.A.M.E, and this does not need spacing, L.A.M.E YouTube UF settings. And now this has to be, you can't put spaces in here, so I use underscore. And version, you must use 2 dots, so a subversion, so 1.0.0. I don't need it to be visible. And I'm going to put my author, L.A.M.E creations, app for setting up a UF. I hit save, that's all I need to do. So I'm going to give it a name. This gives a nice display name, not that it really matters because I'm not going to make the thing visible. Then I'm going to call it the folder. Here's the version, author, description. If I hit save, it'll take me back to the main screen when it's done. And if I'd made it visible, I would have seen it listed there. I didn't make it visible. So what we'll do is we'll back out a ways, and there should be a L.A.M.E YouTube. Let's go look. L.A.M.E YouTube UF settings. So if I go L.A.M.E, there it is. And there is a local directory, but there's not anything besides that comp file there. But if I go CD default, I can see again just a comp file. Let's go look at that app.comp file, and you'll notice when I named it, the author, there's L.A.M.E creations, there's that description, there's the version, here's that whole part about being visible, and here's where I had the spaces, this is what it would display if it was visible, etc. So that's all that's in this app right now. All right, we're gonna move out, and I'm gonna move L.A.M.E YouTube UF settings to deployment apps. That way, because it doesn't do me any good here in the apps. I want to be able to push it out to my other machines. And the deployment server is only going to see the apps that are listed in deployment apps. And to demo that, I'm going to come in here, settings, forwarder management. That's where we manage all forwarding. If I look at apps, if we come down this list, there's a L.A.M.E YouTube TA, L.A.M.E Weekend, L.A.M.E UF settings. It's alphabetical, so it won't be there. We have 13 apps, but L.A.M.E YouTube TA is not there because it's not in the deployment apps folder. If you want it to show up, it's got to be in the deployment apps folder. That's why we're going to move it here. And now if I go there, L.A.M.E YouTube TA. I know I'm not going to have this problem, but you're going to want to ls minus lh. I want to make sure that Splunk owns them all. Sometimes when you move files, if you're running as root, it'll all send me as root. Splunk won't be able to read it. So just make sure all your apps are owned by Splunk, and they are. And so now if I come back to this page and refresh, 14 apps. And there's my L.A.M.E YouTube UF settings. It only shows up once it is sitting inside the deployment-apps folder. All right, so now normally you would write these things in or copy them from somewhere. I'm going to default and I'm going to cp deployment client.conf2. Make sure I go back one enough. That would be, what was it? YouTube UF settings default. What I'm doing is I'm copying this deployment clients.conf file that's already been set up for me. I don't want to retype that whole thing. You could get that same file from your deployment server, however you want, however you need to get the deployment.conf written out, go ahead and pull it. And I'm just copying it over into this default folder. I could go and hand jam it all in there. I don't want to. cp outputs.conf. So I'm just going to, now I want to do the outputs.conf file. So I'm going to send that one as well. If I go outputs, now we look, we have a deployment client.conf and an outputs.conf file here. And if I go into them, just so you can see them again, all you need is this stanza and your target URI. Put the name of your machine there. Um, there's lots of ways of getting that code. If you want to hand jam it in yourself, by all means, go ahead. You can run the shorthand this that we have on the app. If you come back to our Splunk instance, underneath Splunk roles, comp file sorry, not Splunk roles, under system admin, useful CLI commands, you'll see the command that you can run on Splunk to automatically create that deployments.conf file and the outputs.conf file. So there's lots of ways of doing it. You don't have to try. The more you hand type, the more likely you are to mess it up. That's just my take. That's why I copied them over even. And now I have everything I need. So if I via my outputs.conf, there it is telling me to push to 109, 109. Perfect. We're good to go. Now we come back to my app server. We've got the app there. It's going to have those config files. So the first thing you do, you got your apps on one side. That's all the apps that can be deployed. You got your clients on the other side. You need to make sure you join here first with the universal forwarder has to be set up to join this deployment server. And we covered that in the previous video. And now I'm going to come to a server class. I'm going to create a new server class. I'm going to call it L.A.M.E YouTube UF apps and give it a good descriptive name like that. Hit save. It's now going to ask me, so what apps do you want to add to this? And I'm going to go, I want the L.A.M.E YouTube UF settings. I'm good with that. So now I have UF settings here. So I've got my apps. I like to go into edit and hit this restart Splunk D. What that's going to say is when this app gets installed, make sure to restart Splunk D. If you have a bunch of config settings being sent over there, you'll want to reset it. Otherwise, you'll push the stuff over, but they won't take action. And so that's just a thing to remember. I'm going to come back into my little server class, L.A.M.E YouTube UF apps. I've got the app side taken care of. Now I need to add clients. And so I come over here to this include list. I want Troy Dev. I could copy the host name. I could copy the DNS. I could pretty much copy any of these fields. I'm just going to put it in here, and I'm not going to hit save. I'm going to hit preview, and it will put a check mark next to the box of the device that fits. So we're including this, and it will show all that matches. An example, if I went 192.star and I hit preview, all three of them match because they all have the 192 address in there. But I don't want this applied to every machine. I can also filter by machine type, so I could go, hey, anything that's a Linux box, it would apply. So if you see this, hit preview. I need to take this off. Interesting, it should have applied it to all four, but I guess it chose not to. But if you got Windows out there, you can put that on there. Just so anyway, and then I could do a 192 here, and then I'm going to exclude 192.168.1.154. This is exactly opposite of what I want to do, but notice I've got the two machines here and the 154 is excluded. So you got a lot of freedom how you want to apply it. You don't have to apply it on a one-by-one basis. You can mass deploy. I'm good. You can also hit this matched and unmatched if you got a lot of systems. Anyway, I'm good with this, so I'm going to hit save. It's going to push the app out, and we see that it pushed an app out. It's going to deploy one client, and this machine, Troy Dev, will have two apps deployed to it, which is interesting. So it must be getting another app somewhere else. And so I'm going to go look. That's something to check. I only said I wanted one on there. So if I go back to forwarder management, I bet I have a L.A.M.E generic settings. Let's see, apps. I bet if I come in here, this is being applied to. Let's see, we can find another way. I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to go to clients, Troy Dev, and I can see that it is a part of the L.A.M.E YouTube UF settings. Cool. But it's also part of this 100 ingest action auto-generated. Interesting. I don't even know what that is, so let's go look. I don't want it part of that class. This is a good example showing what you can do from your deployment server. I'm going to come in here. It's got an app, and I'm part of it. I don't want to be part of it, so I'm going to get myself excluded from that list. So I'll just put that on there. I'm going to save, preview. I came off. Now I'm not getting that app sent to me. And so if we come back to our machine here. Check it out, Troy Dev. It's got one machine, one app deployed to it. It's part of one server class, and this is the app that's set on it. I'm good with that. Okay, so now that's all we need to do because we built an app. If we are going to make a change to an app, so we've got the server class, it's already been established, and we're going to come along and I'm going to go into this app. It's already been pushed out to machines. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go, let's see. I look at this app.conf and I've decided I'm going to make a change. It's no longer version 1.0. Oh, it's version 1.00, 1.1. Whole point is I have made a change now to the settings in Splunk, in this deployment after already pushing out an app. Once I push it out to the customer, once I push it out to a site, it's no longer, it's been changed, it's been modified. In that situation, I'm going to have to run a little op Splunk bin Splunk reload deploy dash server. You need to run op Splunk bin Splunk reload deploy dash server. So let's just, I'm going to go somewhere where I can actually see that a little easier. So you can see the code. We're going to just go cd. And if I go op Splunk bin Splunk reload, this will, if I run this command, it will basically tell the Splunk deployment server, hey, you know what, I've made changes to stuff. Is everything checking back in? Please update. And that's a good way. They'll eventually catch on that there's a new file and they'll download it, but this is a way of saying to everything that's calling home, you see all these machines, they're calling in, we look at the clients, they call in every few seconds, a minute ago. It's telling these machines, hey, I've made some changes, go grab those changes. It's the way to make sure everything happens. Otherwise, those changes will come over in whenever these systems decide to, and it may not happen as fast as you want. So that's a way of forcing these machines to see that there's a change in the app, and they'll download the latest app. All right, so let's jump over to my universal forwarder, and if I let's go op Splunk forwarder etc apps. There is my lame YouTube UF settings. It just shows up. If I erase something from this file, in a few minutes, it'll go up there. It'll say, hey, there's been a differentiation in the two files, and it will actually download the latest contents again. So it's just going to keep maintaining this folder. There's lots of, that's one of the reasons I like Universal Forwarder. It keeps revision control. The one thing it won't change is the local folder. You make changes inside local, that won't get overwritten. But if you make a change in default, it'll override it. If you have, and so as long as you're following best practices on a deployment server, that's why you want to make your changes in default, and then the local changes are occurred in the local folder. But let's go talk another issue. So we've got this set up, and if I go into default, deploymentclient.conf and outputs.conf, and I look at my outputs.conf, it's going to tell me that it's sending it off to 192.168.1.109. That's awesome. There's only one problem. I'm not going to run the btools command. If I run btools and I run it on the outputs.conf, what you're going to find is there are more than one outputs.conf in my Splunk instance. And there's an order of precedence. I want to take you back to my L.A.M.E analysis here. Splunk roles, we've got apps, apps, apps. We've got tricks about how to run apps, but one of the next things I want you to see here under Splunk roles is if you're a system admin, sorry, not system admin, data admin, conf order of files of precedence. Basically what it's going to tell you is that user settings come first, system settings come next, app settings come last. So if I have an outputs.conf, cool, it's in the apps folder. But if there's another outputs.conf in my system settings, that one will override this one. And well, do I have that? Let's go look. Etsy system local. Oh, look, there's a outputs.conf file there. And let's actually put outputs.conf. And if I come all the way back, for some reason my keyboard is choosing not to allow me to hold it down. And I go vi, it's got 119, not the 109. So this is going to override the other. And so even though I pushed out an app, Etsy system gains priority, and thereby the changes won't take effect. So how do I fix that? Well, I'm going to go into Etsy system local. All right, so we're going to use this command here, Splunk show config outputs. There's nothing else on the end of that. And what this is going to do is it's going to show me the config settings for my outputs file. If I do that, I can see that I have a conflicting. I've got a 192.168.1.109 and a 192.168.1.119. And I can tell the 119 is going to take precedence, and so this 109 is never going to work. So what we want to do is if I remove outputs.conf here, and then I restart Splunk, and now I run the outputs, it's going to ask me to log in. All right, I have just one entry now. It is now just going to 109. I hope you can see, I hope that helps you gather what's going on. If I look at my local directory, outputs.conf is gone. I also will have the exact same problem if I go deployment client. Now, to be fair, they both point to the same location, so I'm okay. But if I want to be able to control where the deployment client is from the deployment server, which has a lot of value, I want to get rid of this Etsy system inside the Etsy system local. So I'm going to remove that one as well, and I'm going to restart Splunk. And we're on our way. So that is how you can control your config settings and set things up to forward logs. I hope that was helpful. That's how I use my deployment server. I let it configure all the settings. You want to control timeouts on your systems. You want to change banners. You want to change whatever. I recommend that you use the tools available to you from a deployment server. You can change all the settings, and as long as it's in the app, I can control whether I use HTTPS, you can control all sorts of commands, settings, thresholds, inputs, whatever, using an app. And using then the deployment server. It's a much more effective method of being able to manage lots of systems. I hope this helps you move from being a L.A.M.E analyst to a Splunk ninja. The next next item we're going to cover is actually forwarding logs that are file monitored from Splunk to our indexer. I hope you'll join that watch that on the playlist as well. Hope to see you soon.